The year is 1968, and the comic book landscape has changed. Marvel adding more titles. How will that affect the books that got graded by CGC as we take a look at the CGC census count, the top books in comic books for 1968, up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that great stuff, and check out the description of this video for links to my Instagram, whatnot, eBay, and email. A side note, because somebody had made a comment. The term panelologist was coined by Jerry Bales, who is pretty much the godfather of comic book collecting. He started a fanzine, one of his early fanzines. He also did Alter Ego, was panelologist, trying to come up with a term similar to terms like newsmatist and philatelist. And I just like to use it. I like old-timey words. And, you know, it is a word from the Silver Age, so it is kind of fun to use. Heck. Any rate, let's get on. Now, 1968. Things changed quite a bit. Now, there are stories about how much Marvel was limited in distribution prior to 1968, and the numbers, like, they don't always add up to me. You know, there are stories out there that they were limited to 6 titles per month, et cetera, or 8 titles per month, I should say, because they were having their books distributed by Cadence Publishing. I'm sorry, by Independent News, which all owned DC Comics. So they didn't want Marvel to get too much of a market share over DC. DC was selling very high. Batman and Superman in 66, 67 were the top, with Archie close behind. And the Marvel titles were a little bit further down. But in 1968, they struck their own distribution deal with Cadence Distribution. Now, the number of actual issues, approximately, that Marvel came out with, cover dated 1967, is 193, which would be more like 16 titles a month. But remember, we think of the superhero titles, Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, Daredevil, Amazing Spider-Man, etc. And there were obviously more than 8. Thor, and then the books that eventually got split in 1968. But there was also Millie the Model, there was Not Brand Eck, there were other things. Now, Marvel also started publishing magazines in 1968, but the number of different titles was only about 30 more in 1968, which is essentially, like 2 or 3 books a month, which is kind of what we saw, right? Some books were canceled, and I would like to do some more in-depth things in terms of the titles that came out and were canceled in individual years. Maybe that's a project to tackle after I'm done with this project. We've been doing this yearly count, and we go only by blue labels for the census count, which is starting to make a difference in terms of yellow labels. And when we get into the mid-70s for some Marvel books, green labels are going to be quite a thing. But that being said, Marvel did increase the number of superhero titles. And those are the things that folks collect, especially today. And so that's going to really dominate our list. We'll see how much it does coming up. Where does the top DC book land? I think there's another aspect here, is that Stan Lee was branching out titles to other writers, specifically Roy Thomas. We talked about this in the last episode, and Roy Thomas was coming up with new characters. Roy Thomas actually created more comic book characters than Stan Lee in his career. For both Marvel and DC, a very lengthy career. So Lee was focusing his writing on a handful of titles and had kind of given Thomas the keys to the kingdom for other titles. We'll talk about a lot of these books, who wrote them, as well as who the artist was. So let's just get started on a list. We're going to start at number 10, and this is Fantastic Four Annual number 6. It's a double key. It's the first appearance of Franklin Richards, the child of Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Girl. And it's also the first appearance, as we see here on the cover, of Annihilus, who is from the Negative Zone. Now, we're pretty sure we're getting Franklin Richards in the Fantastic Four movie because this trailer has indicated that Sue is pregnant. Annihilus, we're not so sure. Now, this particular book, and again, the collectability, books are in better condition in 1968. Just there's been a shift, right? So this particular book has a census count of 3,014. It's 10th on the list. Compare that to 1967. Only 4 books exceeded 3,000 copies on the census. We still don't have a new record yet. Fantastic 448 is still the top book to date with Blue Label copies on the census. So that's Fantastic Four Annual 6, Lee and Kirby. Let's go to number 9 on the list. And this is one of those brand new books, the books that came out in April, May, June of 1968, where they took these anthology titles, Strange Tales, Tales to Astonish, Tales of Suspense, and split them into books starring those characters, right? So this came out of Strange Tales, which had been starring Doctor Strange and Nick Fury. And this is Doctor Strange number 169. It's the first Doctor Strange in his own title. It is a Roy Thomas story and Dan Adkins cover and art. So this is one of those number ones. There are really 8 of them, 6 that got split, and then 2 brand new titles. And we're going to talk about all of them. And then there's an extra one, which makes this list. See if you can guess what that one is that I'm referring to. But Doctor Strange number 169 from June has a census count of 3,395. The next book on the list, number 8 on the list, is Silver Surfer number 3. This is the first appearance of Mephisto. Is he going to be in the Ironheart series? Who knows? He's supposed to have been in everything that Marvel's come out with for the last 5 years. But this is Stanley's story, John Buscema cover and art. Gene Colan and Paul Reinman also contributed art. There is, I believe, these square bounds. So this is a 25-cent square bound book, which Silver Surfer was at the time. We'll talk more about that specifically in a few minutes. A very collectible series, too, because it only lasted 18 issues. And this first appearance of Mephisto does drive it. This particular book has a census count of 3,837. Coming in at number 7 on the list is the book I just alluded to. It is Iron Man and Submariner number 1. This is from April, and basically it's a special once-in-a-lifetime issue. Roy Thomas and Archie Goodwin did the stories. Gene Colan did the art. I know Colan did the Iron Man. Did he do the Submariner too, or was that the Johnny Craig and Frank Giacoya art? Now, when those 3 titles split, they became 6 new titles. 3 number 1s, and then 3 that just changed the title, like Doctor Strange went from Strange Tales to Doctor Strange with issue 169. So these characters, Doctor Strange, Submariner, and Iron Man amongst them, had basically, 11, 12-page stories because they split the books. And then they went to full-length stories with their new issues. But this came out the same month as a lot of the other number 1s. And my guess is they just had these stories already written and drawn. And rather than expanding them for issue number 1, they said, okay, we got 2 of these. Let's just throw them in this special issue. I guess people like number 1s, right? I'm not sure when number 1s became popular. They're very popular in the 70s, weren't so popular in the early 60s. They were so unpopular in the late 50s, early 60s that, like DC, Justice League of America, and Aquaman, and some other books don't even have issue number 1 on the cover. But this promotes that, and that's kind of where we are. So the March came out, Tales to Astonish with Iron Man, Tales of Suspense with Submariner, Tales of Suspense with Iron Man. And then in May, well, we'll get to those books. I think they're going to be a little higher on the list, don't you? This particular book has a census count of 4,370. Coming in at number 6 on the list is Incredible Hulk, number 102, big premiere issue. Okay. Continued from Tales to Astonish 101. Gary Friedrich's story. Marie Severin, George Tuska art. Marie Severin also did the cover. One of the pioneering women artists of the Silver Age, I would say, along with Ramona Fredone, who did work at DC, mostly on Aquaman, and creator of Metamorpho. So this is that big premiere issue, right? And Hulk shared Tales to Astonish with Submariner. He had his own title in the early 60s that lasted just 6 issues. This picks that up. Again, Gary Friedrich, a new writer coming on to breathe new life into these books. This particular issue has a census count of 4,773. Go to number 5 on the list. Captain America number 100. The first issue in his series. Classic cover here by Jack Kirby and Sid Shore. Stan Lee did the story on this one. So he stayed with Cap, right? And it continued from Tales of Suspense 99. Captain America shared Tales of Suspense with Iron Man. They split up, each got their own books. Cap kept the numbering of his book, as did Hulk and Doctor Strange. And there's an interesting note about that is those books are lower on the census than the other ones. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to it. So, again, that split. Stan Lee did the story on this. Lee and Kirby stayed on this one for a little while. I'm not exactly sure how long Kirby stayed on this book, if he did past this issue even. But this has a census count of 5,771. Now, we take a little break from this, but we're going to relate it to something else we talked about. Number 4 on the list is Avengers number 57. This is the first appearance of the Vision, and I will note that this is from October of 1968. We'll reference that a little bit later on in the list. This classic cover by John Buscema. Roy Thomas did the story. We talked last week about in the 1967 episode, and I think maybe even the 66 episode, about how Roy Thomas was really breathing new life into the Avengers. It had been so long that the Avengers lineup had been Cap, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. He brought back old characters, brought in new characters, created his own characters, including the Vision, one of the more popular ones of this era. We do have 2 other Avengers issues on this list that we will talk about with first appearances. John Buscema also really becoming a very popular artist at the time. Most of the art we saw was, Kirby, Ditko, Romita, and then maybe some Wally Wood or Bill Everett on these lists. But let's go to number 3 on the list. And number 3 on the list is Submariner number 1. The first issue, this comes out the month after Iron Man Submariner. The story continues from that. And it's a Roy Thomas story, John Buscema. Art and cover. One of the interesting things, so many of these Marvel books from this issue have the characters with their feet really far apart, like Doctor Doom in Marvel Superheroes 20. We'll see another book on this list. They just like that. We'll actually see 2 other books on this list, I think, that are like that. Just keep that in mind. The wide set feet. But again, a classic cover, issue number 1 of his own series. And again, Roy Thomas doing the writing, not Stan Lee on this one. This has a census count of 5,893. In addition, this has the most 9/8 of any book in the top 10 with 89 9/8. That's amazing. There must have been a case that was kept somewhere, that an undistributed distributor pack or something. I don't know why there's so many 9/8, but there are 89 for this book. We're going to now go to number 2 on the list, and number 2 is Silver Surfer number 1. Stan Lee stayed with this. John Buscema did the cover. Buscema, Sinnott, Colin, and Sid Shores did the art. Origin the Silver Surfer here. The Tales of the Watcher begins. Again, this was a 25-cent. I'm going to say 64 pages. Let us check that. I want to be sure of that. But this is a classic book. And I said earlier that there are only 18 issues in the series. So it is a fairly collectible series. It's an expensive number 1, but not insanely so. And Where the heck is it? Why don't I see Silver Surfer? 18 issues. Issue number 1. It is a page count of 68. 64 plus the cover. 68 pages. So it is more than twice the size of an ordinary book, right? A regular book is 32 pages. This is 68. And so it had a backup story with the Watcher. There are also, in addition, there are 792 restored copies, and this does have the lowest mean grade of the top 10 at 5.71. So a couple of notes about that. Being a square-bound book, and especially a square-bound book of this vintage, it's easy to get spine splits. Much easier to get spine split on a square-bound book, just because of the way that it would have been read, than a saddle-stitched book, or a book that's stapled through the 16 wraps, or 8 wraps. So a little bit tougher book to get in high grade. And there are a total Blue Label of 6,667 copies on the Census. Now let's go to number 1. Have you figured it out by now? Process of elimination brings us to Iron Man. Number 1 is the top book on the Census, and this also is from May. Now, Silver Surfer came out in August, a little bit later on, so it was March, April, May that we saw the splitting of these 3 anthology titles, and we got Iron Man number 1 as well as some of the others. Again, look how far apart his feet are on this one. Archie Goodwin did the story. Gene Colan and Johnny Craig art. Gene Colan did the cover. What I find interesting is that the top 3 books here on the Census are all number 1s, right? Silver Surfer, Iron Man, and Submariner. Submariner outpaces Captain America and Hulk. I don't think, in general, Submariner is as popular a character as those guys. I think we might have seen the numbers switched quite a bit. I think if Hulk had gotten the number 1 and Silver Surfer had gotten the 102, we would have seen a lot more copies of the Hulk. Hulk might have even been number 1 on the list. And maybe the same with Captain America and Iron Man. They might have flip-flopped spots. So the number 1 probably was more grabbed up at the time because it was the number 1. And, kids wanted to get into something new. And if you were a collector, you could start with number 1, right? If you're collecting Fantastic Four and you got to start, with issue, 60-something, then you're like, I'm never going to get those early issues. Or if you're looking at Batman or Superman or some of those DC titles that are in the hundreds, you're not getting. But Submariner, Iron Man, Silver Surfer, number 1, maybe I can get all of them. I can jump in at the starting point. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the fact that the number 1s all take the top 3 slots. So this book also has 3 9.9s. I don't know how that happened. That's just crazy. And there's a total of 7,981 copies on the Census. There are also 759 signature series, and you're going to see a lot more of that. Colan's no longer with us. Stan Lee signed a bunch of stuff. I would imagine that Stan Lee's probably the number 1 signer of this book, but it remains to be seen. There's about 10% of the Blue Label, copies, there are yellow labels. So that's a pretty sizable number. And that might affect some of the books that we see a little bit later on the list, because there's somebody that's very important at this point in time that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll get to him shortly. So you'll also notice that all top 10 of the books are Marvel books. So we're going to look at some other Marvel keys. We're going to go through the top 10 DC books. And let's start with number 11. And it's another Marvel book. We had its predecessor on last year's book. This is the January book. This is Avengers number 48, the first appearance of the new Black Knight. Dane Whitman becomes a Black Knight. Roy Thomas story, George Tuska art and cover. And again, Roy Thomas introducing a new character into the Avengers. This book I think the number of copies got boosted a lot during the boom when Kit Harington was cast as Dane Whitman in the Eternals film. Then the movie came out, and we haven't heard a peep about Kit Harington, Dane Whitman, Black Knight since for Marvel. I think he would be a fun character, but Marvel's kind of probably just reshuffling all their cards at this point. So we'll see. Those Eternals post-credit sequences are like the bridge to nowhere. At any rate, we have Avengers number 48, 3,010 copies on the census. Again, I think largely driven during the boom. Number 12 on the list is the top Amazing Spider-Man book. We didn't have an ASM book in the top 10. That's how much those splits, right? Other than Avengers 57 and Silver Surfer 3 and FF Annual 4. 7 of the top 10 were caused by the split. Right? All plus the Silver Surfer number 1, which is, the new books. Anyway, Amazing Spider-Man 59, first Mary Jane Watson cover appearance. Stan Lee story, John Romita cover and art. It's an ASM book. People are going to collect it. And 2,819 copies are on the census. At number 13 on the list is X-Men number 50. And this is who I was talking about before. This is the second appearance of Polaris. This is all about this Jim Steranko cover. Steranko came on the scene about this time, and I don't know how many signature series. I should have made a note of this. How many signatures? There are a lot of these. He signed this book. You can see even the predecessor, right, gets signed. And a lot of those signatures, it's only recently that CGC has been authenticating signatures that already existed. So at any rate, X-Men number 50, also the new trade dress for X-Men that had lasted forever, right? It was even in like the TV series and so on. Just a wonderful Steranko cover. This, and again, Polaris isn't a huge character. It's this cover that drives this book. 2,811 copies on the census. At number 14 on the list is Avengers number 55. This is the first appearance of Ultron, Roy Thomas, John Buscema. Again, a new character. Got propelled probably somewhat by the movie, but still is a good solid key and is related to that first appearance of the Vision. This has a total of 2,585 copies on the census. The next book does have the movies driving it to a degree. And this is Marvel Superheroes number 13. This is the first appearance of Carol Danvers. She doesn't have powers at this point in time. She's kind of the maybe quasi romantic interest of Marvel. But it's the second appearance of Marvel 2. It is a Roy Thomas story. Gene Colan did the art. This is also a square-bound book because you can see plus Submariner, Captain America, Human Torch, Black Knight, and The Vision. Those are all reprints. That's the Golden Age Vision because this is 5 months before we got the Silver Age Vision. At any rate, this book has a total of 2,537 Blue Label copies on the census. And related to this, and this is a book a lot of people forget about in terms of the number ones for 1968. So here we have it. Story continues for Marvel Superheroes number 13. You got that 2-issue tryout, then got his own series. Roy Thomas, Gene Colan working on this one. Again, Thomas is pulling an awful lot of weight over at Marvel at this time, creating all these new characters. This is not as high as the other ones because this is a character, this particular version, the Walter Lawson Marvel version of Captain Marvel, kind of forgotten because he's been dead for over 40 years and has stayed dead. Carol Danvers has taken over the mantle of Captain Marvel. And this book, in many ways, this character was created just to grab the trademark for Marvel Comics to have Captain Marvel. Of course, we had a Captain Marvel in the Golden Age from Fawcett that DC eventually got the rights to and had to use Shazam. There's also Captain Marvel from, MF Enterprises from 1966. But this is Captain Marvel and trademark preservation character. This particular book has a census count of 2,398. Now, the last big number one issue, and this came out last of that first wave of the splits, right? This is Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 1. And this is, again, a classic cover by Jim Steranko. I would think this would be higher on the list if we included the signature series, but I don't have time to, I'm trying to do this is a difficult enough series to put together, and I know folks enjoy it. The book will be on the list, and where it falls is, it's not really a competition. It's just an opportunity for us to have a discussion about it. People are going to get their Steranko books signed. He is still around, does a lot of signings, and this is his wheelhouse. This is when he was producing comics. I wish one of the either Marvel or DC, I mean more Marvel because he was connected to Marvel, would get him to do some new variant covers. I don't know if his artwork is still on point like it was, 57 years ago, but could you imagine a brand new variant cover by Jim Steranko? That I would love to see. Let me know. Let me know what you think. At any rate, this is Strange Tales, Doctor Strange. Nick Fury got the number 1. And this is a little bit further down on the list, 2,397. I'm going to stick with this idea of Steranko and go to Incredible Hulk Annual number 1. The first annual, this classic. I mean, the composition of this cover is just genius. It's been homaged so many times. Just a really fun cover. Of course, Maurice Severin had to redo the face because I think Hulk was too scary or something the first time they did it. Again, a 25 center, harder to get in high grade because that square-bound spine is going to split more often. This, 2,198 copies on the Census. Let's go to the next book on the list. And this is X-Men number 49, the first appearance of Polaris. Arnold Drake story and Jim Steranko cover. Drake, who had done Doom Patrol over at DC, right? Again, Jim Steranko cover. People love it. It's right there. Right? I have one. There's my Steranko. I had bought one signed to Dan. And this was before CGC did verification. So I got it for a really good deal, actually. But that's beside the point. This is a Steranko cover all the way. Again, Polaris isn't a huge character. So it's the Steranko cover that drives it. 1,847 copies on the Census. What about DC? DC. Now we're going to go to the top DC book. It's 26th overall on the list. And this is also a book that's been driven up recently. And this is Green Lantern number 59, the first appearance of Guy Gardner. John Broome story, Gil Kane art. Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson did the cover. Now, I should point out, there is something a little bit curious about this book. And that's it. Guy Gardner isn't really Green Lantern. It's kind of an imaginary story. Right? Hal Jordan gets in touch with one of the Guardians and basically says, what would have happened if it hadn't been me? If I was unavailable or whatever. And they said, okay, he was unavailable. It would have been this guy on the East Coast. If Abensor had landed on the East Coast, it would have been Guy Gardner instead of you. And actually, so it plays out this imaginary story. It's like, this, I guess, almost alternate reality. One of the Guardians shows Hal of Guy being a Green Lantern, and spoiler warning, at the end of the issue, he dies. But that didn't really happen. That was only like a what if kind of situation, an imaginary story. So Hal actually tracks down the real Guy who's never been Green Lantern in this reality and sees that he's okay and feels good about it. He pops up again in issue number 87 where he's unavailable, he's in the hospital, and then we don't see him, I think, until Green Lantern 117. And then he was used very intermittently and really gained his popularity in the DeMatteis, Giffen, Maguire, Justice League, Wahaha run of the mid to late 80s. But Nathan Fillion's playing him in the movie. People are going to be pointing to that. I do plan, so check out the channel. I am doing some history videos. I'm going to do a Who's Who in DC, a history of Guy Gardner. So you'll get a lot more information about him in that. But this is the top DC book for 1968. It's 26th overall on the list. So there are 27 Marvel books ahead of it. 1,827 copies on the Census. The next DC book on the list is Batman number 200. This has a Neil Adams cover. It's the first time that Neil Adams did art on the Batman cover. Mike Friedrich's story, Chick Stone and Joe Giella art. Again, anniversary issue, Neil Adams cover. That's what's driving this. 1,337 copies on the Census. Number 75 on the list. third book, DC book, is Showcase number 73, the first appearance of the Creeper. Steve Ditko created the character along with Don Siegel, and he did the art. This is kind of the second wave of Showcase. They would reintroduce a lot of Silver Age characters, Justice Society characters, and done some other things. And then at this point, they were getting back into doing some new characters that became superheroes. Kind of had short-lived series at the time. This, the Creeper, again, done by Ditko after he had left Marvel and then left Charlton and gone to DC. He came into the Creeper, one of the weirder character designs, even for Ditko. He makes... He's like, you know, you thought Craven was flamboyant? Creeper's like, hold my beer. And this book has a census count of 707. The next DC book on the list is Showcase number 75, the first appearance of Hawk and Dove. Steve Skeets did the story, and Steve Ditko did cover and art. Origin and first appearance of Hawk and Dove. They had their own short-lived series. They were members of the Titans, and they've had their own series iterations in DC on and off, different characters taking on the mantle. This has a census count of 652. We did see them in the Titans series, if you watch that. The next book on the list, the fifth DC book, is Showcase number 79, and it's the first appearance of Dolphin. J. Scott Pike. Story, cover, and art. There's also a reprint of Aqualad's first appearance, the backup, but that's not why people buy this. People buy this, I think, essentially for the cover. First appearance of Dolphin's a nice plus, but this cover. J. Scott Pike, most of his work was in romance books. Dolphin was kind of forgotten for years. Was actually a member of the Forgotten Heroes that did have some appearances in the 80s in Action Comics and DC Comics Presents. There's no real origin of her here. That comes much later on. She was brought into the Aquaman series as a romantic interest for Aquaman after Mira had left him. I had posited that maybe that's where they would go if they continued the Aquaman storyline and they had to lose Amber Heard to bring Dolphin in, but that's all done. Still, a really cool cover, a fun character. Actually, her next appearance was Showcase 100, along with every other character, unlicensed character that was that DC owned at the time. Census count here of 539. The next book on the list is Detective Comics 371. This is where we get a new Batmobile based on the design from the TV series. Gardner Fox story, Gil Kane, Sid Green, Mike Sikowski art, Carmine Infantino and Murphy Anderson did the cover. And she gets a run in her uniform. Batgirl, get over here, help us. We've got a problem. I have a bigger one and run in my tights. It was a different time. This is the last year of the Batman TV series, which Batgirl was, that was the only season she was included in, season 3, which ran from September of 67 through June of 68. So this would have been right in the middle of her third series. But that show has lived on in reruns and such. And that classic Batmobile design from that book. This has a census count of 567. The next book on the list, next DC book, is Beware the Creeper #1. We said he had his own short-lived series. Steve Ditko did this, along with Denny O'Neil did some of the writing. What was it, 7 issues maybe of the Creeper? 463 copies on the census. The next book on the list is Justice League of America #64. First appearance of Red Tornado. Now, I said to keep in mind something, right? This book is cover dated August of 1968. Red Tornado is an android. He obviously is red. And he comes in as maybe a villain and then eventually joins the team. Can you think of other characters that are androids, are red, and comes in as a villain and eventually joins the team? The Vision. This is cover date August 1968. The Vision's first appearance is cover date October 1968. Red Tornado came first. I like Red Tornado. He's a personal favorite of mine. There was a Red Tornado in the Golden Age. It was in the Scribbly series in All American Comics. It was a woman who put on red long johns and a pot over her head. and was a superhero. Actually had an appearance, like comic interlude in All-Star Comics 3, so was a member of the Justice Society. He thinks he's original Red Tornado, is a member of the team. Eventually joins the JSA, and a few years later, I guess 3 years later, right? No, 4 years later. Yeah, because it was 8 times a year. 4 years later, in 1972, actually the following year, in 73, he joins the JLA. That's a whole convoluted story that we'll get to at some point, perhaps. But this has a total number of Blue Label copies of 453. Next book on the list is Detective Comics 373. This is the second appearance of Mr. Freeze, the first appearance in which he is referred to as Mr. Freeze. Gardner Fox did the story. Chick Stone, Gil Kane, Sid Green art, and Irv Novick did the cover. Again, his first appearance is thousands of dollars, right? So this is a more affordable book for Mr. Freeze fans. Potentially, there's been talk about him being used in some form. I would think they'd come back to Mr. Freeze. We don't want to leave it with the Arnold Schwarzenegger version being the last live-action thing we've seen. We have to move on from that. This is the 9th DC book on the list, Ice to Meet You. And it has a total of 359 copies on the Census. And the 10th DC book on the Census is Batman number 199. This Gardner Fox story, Sheldon Moldoff, Joe Giella art, Carmine Infantino, Murphy Anderson cover. Kind of like this. Quick, let me have a copy of Batman Comics. It's a matter of life or death. Mine. Too late, Batman. I'm all sold out. Well, you can get any of these other titles. The Superman Flash race in there. That's from 67. At any rate, Batman number 199, 10th DC book on the list, 315 copies on the Census. Now we're going to have to talk about the other publishers. Let's go to Gold Key. The top Gold Key book for the year is Star Trek number 2. Star Trek number 1 was their top book from last year. This is the top book from this year. This photo cover, and that really drives it. Star Trek actually had kind of the same time frame that it was on TV as Batman. It premiered, I think it was a season off, right? Batman premiered in January 66, Star Trek in September 66. So it ran through 1969. It did last. Batman was 2.5 seasons. Star Trek was 3 full seasons. Started a half season later and finished a full season later. At any rate, I digress. This Gold Key book with the photo cover. Interesting that both the photo covers of number 1 and 2, Spock is the more prominent character. Total of, and again, Leonard Nimoy did a great job as Spock. I've talked so many times about how Frank Gorshin was nominated for an Emmy Award for his portrayal of the Riddler. That was in a comedy series. He lost to Don Knotts. Nimoy was nominated for an Emmy for portraying Spock. And that would have been a drama series because it was an hour-long series. And who did he lose to? I'm thinking, did he lose to Bill Cosby? Let's see. I'm looking this up. What? Oh, photography. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Filmography. Awards and nominations. He was nominated 3 times for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series. All 3 seasons of the show, which is kind of interesting. He lost to Eli Wallach for The Poppy is Also a Flower, which I think was a TV movie. Milburn Stone for Gunsmoke. And he lost... Oh, then the third year in 69, there was just 1 supporting actor for drama and comedy, and he lost to Werner Klemperer as Colonel Klink on Hogan's Heroes, who appeared on the Batman TV series. So we've come full circle in our little stories. At any rate, this particular book, Star Trek number 2, has a census count of 293. The top Archie book. Oh, hold on, folks. The top Archie book for 1968 is Betty and Me number 16. Let's read what the word balloons say on the cover. Archie, did you have any trouble rescuing me? I sure did, Betty. I had to beat off 3 other guys. And beat off is put in bold red letters. Do with this what you will. classic cover with risque dialogue and Dan DiCarlo cover. So, yeah, Betty and Me, number 16. This has a total census count of 256. From Charlton. Charlton is still doing with the superheroes, but it's winding down. All these other publishers are doing superheroes. It's starting to wind down at this point, including the Charlton books. Their top book from 1968, which is later in the year, October of 68, is Mysterious Suspense number 1. It is the first solo question story. He had been the backup in Blue Beetle. Steve Ditko and David Glanzman did the story. Ditko did the cover and art. 159 copies on the census. Up next is The Avengers number 1. You're saying, that's not from 1968. Well, if we're talking about the TV show, The Avengers, which is in very small print on the cover here, but that's what's on the indicia. This is a gold key book. It is the John Steed and Emma Peel logo on cover, based on the ABC TV series, which is a British series. The lid's off, a spy game a la Mod, based on the TV series The Avengers. I'll tell you what, when I was like younger, and I get the TV guide, right, before the internet. You folks may not be old enough to even conceive of that. Even before, like, you could search, like, on your cable box for series. I would go through the TV guide to see if there were any movies, TV shows that I wanted to watch, sporting events, largely. And it would always, there was a part of my brain that always, like, just snapped whenever I had, like, oh, and then I realized, no, it's not that. When I saw The Avengers that was on late at night, or The Defenders, which was a 1960s courtroom drama with Eli Wallach, right? Yes. No. E.G. Marshall. I always get those two names confused. E.G. Marshall and Robert Reed, Mr. Brady. Avengers number 1 has a census count of 123. There's also a movie done of this, a remake. Who was that? Ralph Fiennes, and it was terrible. From like the late 90s. If you ever saw that movie, let me know if you liked it, and I did not. We can have differences of opinion. I thought it was a piece of garbage. At any rate, 123 copies on the census. Top book from Warren. Not creepy or eerie, but Famous Monsters of Filmland number 50, this Gorgo cover. Gorgo had been a Charlton book for a long time. It's the 50th anniversary cover. So I've never seen Gorgo. I do want to watch Gorgo at some point. Top Warren book, 98 copies on the census. Now here we go, Apex Novelties, their top book. And we're going to kind of do this quickly because we're going to come back to it. Robert Crumb, story, cover, and art. Right? This is the second print. It's for adults only. The second printing has a total of 81 copies on the census. Let's move on. Gilberton's top book from the year is Classics Illustrated Junior, number 535, HRN 576. This is the Twin Circle variant. And you see down there at the bottom right-hand cover, it says, in 2 circles, Twin Circle, the National Catholic Press feature section. This had come out earlier, like in the early 60s, I believe. I always say, you know, when you find collections, right? One of the bad things is finding 90s Valiant. There's a lot of it. Like, there are enough Turok ones out there. I don't need any more. Even worse than that is Classics Illustrated. There's some good Classics Illustrated, but you got to find the right HRN number and so on and so forth. But even worse than Classics Illustrated is Classics Illustrated Junior. That's something nobody wants. I got a bunch of like really high grade VF or better copies in a box back there that have been sitting on eBay for like 2 years. I have to do something with them. At any rate, this book, again, Wizard of Oz popular, 70 copies on the census. The next book on the list is the top book from Gilbert Shelton. All right, Gilbert Shelton is the guy who created it. This is Feds and Heads number 1. This is the first comic book appearance of the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. Another underground book, Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. I do believe they did smoke a lot of marijuana. For enlightened adults only. They're basically the comic book version of Cheech and Chong. They did have their own book for a bit. Again, with these underground books, numerous printings, and it's not like they say, this is the 3rd printing, this is the 7th printing. You got to kind of figure it out in many cases. But this has 56 copies on the Census. Let's stay with Underground. Zap Comics from Apex Novelties. This is the head first miscut. The head first strip on page 40 is misaligned, so the artwork is cut off at the bottom of the page. I guess that's expensive? I don't know. Is that the true first printing? I'm not an expert in Underground Comics, I'm afraid. So this particular book, evidently, it's more available than the first printing. We'll get to that in a minute. 42 copies on the Census. Top book from Harvey. For no particular reason, Richie Rich 65. File copies of this Warren Kramer cover. There's no significance to this book to make it different than any other 1960s Richie Rich book. The mean Census grade, the mean grade is 9.26. So that had to be just a lot of file copies. And again, it's not a book you're going to get graded if it's not like a 9.8 or something. 37 copies on the Census. 554th on the list. Zap Comics number 2, the first printing. I don't know how we tell the difference, but this is R. Crumb, Underground Comics. Is this I'm not sure if this is magazine sized or not. I've had some copies of subsequent printings. And again, it's so difficult to determine which printing it is. But these were printed again. They're just printed in the print shop. Oh, let's come out with some more. It wasn't, because this wasn't distributed like Marvel and DC and so on, and Gold Key and Archie, etc. Those were all distributed to distributors, and they also had mail subscriptions. So there's postal records, and so they had to adhere to the Comics Code. So the way they did things had to be very corporate and very organized. The Undergrounds, it was whatever. Zap Comics number 2, first print. 32 copies on the Census. The next book on the list is the top book from Tower. And this is Thunder Agents, number 19. This is a Wally Wood book. And this is kind of the end of the Tower Comics run of superheroes. Again, I've talked about this in the past when we went over the earlier issues of this. This is the penultimate issue. The number 20 came out the next year. So this was the last issue for 1968. Wally Wood did the art on this, and it was his own creation. This was a bigger book, also 25 cent. I believe it's square bound. I do have a copy somewhere, but not graded. 27 copies on the Census. From Print Mint, their top book. This is Bijou Funnies, number 1, the second print. Jay Lynch cover and art. Also included stories by Robert Crumb, Skip Williamson, Gilbert Shelton, who did the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, and Jay Kinney. Adults only, Underground stuff. Again, I'm not a real big expert in Undergrounds. If you do have more expertise in that, you can put some information in the comments below. I'm sure other viewers would appreciate it. This has a total of 23 copies on the Census. Top book from Dell. We haven't talked about Dell yet. The top book from Dell, not a Disney book, is Monkeys, number 10. With this photo cover of them as, are they real? Are they believable? Are they kidding? The monkeys are back. This was also a TV series of a Beatles-esque musical group. And it was very, very much based on the Beatles movies. And it was very kind of surreal TV series that came out at this time. This has a total of 22 copies on the Census. Let's go to some other weirdos. This is from American Iron and Steel. This is Mark Steele, no number. Again, from the American Steel Institute. It does have Neil Adams art on the interior. 16 copies on the Census. From Adventure House Press. This is a magazine. His name is Savage. This has interior work by Gil Kane. And now I'm trying to remember who did the cover. This was is basically a graphic novel, and it's more adult in terms of the violence and stuff that they were able to show. Yeah, it's the only issue. Bob Foster did the cover. And Lee Marvin, the Academy Award winning actor he won for Cat Bayou, right? He was in the movie Point Blank that came out around this time, used as reference for this painting. But Gil Kane, he wanted to have a creator-owned book, 52 pages. I think it's magazine-sized. I'm almost interested in obtaining a copy for myself because this looks just kind of like a cool little something different. And I do this every once in a while when I find these things that are like just, different. On the census count, and I would want a raw book because I don't know again, we don't talk about values on here. Let's see. His Name is Savage doesn't come up in my first search. Getting Captain Savage, Savage Tales. Huh. Let me try quotation marks. His name is Savage. Oh, come on. So at any rate, this no exact matches found. So this must be hard to find. I have it. Oh, there it is. 65, 140, 9.2 for 225. Okay. VG plus, VF minus for 250, VF near mint for 250. I'll take a look at some of these and see what the prices are. So it is available. High grade copy, about $200. So maybe I'll get a copy of this because I think it's kind of curious. It's a little bit different. Something that I've never seen. I think it has been reprinted, but it'll probably be as difficult to run down the reprint. His Name is Savage, 15 copies on the census. Spent a lot of time talking about a book that has 15 copies on the census. But it's just one of those things that, like, it intrigued me. Okay, up next is from Erie, Tales of Voodoo number 11, featuring Erie Bones, Bloody Mary, Crack Up, plus other weird voodoo tales from beyond. Graphic cover, this, like, serpent stabbing this woman right in the chest. Thing to remember, Comics Code Authority did not extend to magazines. So things like Vampirella, Creepy, Eerie, this book, even in the 70s with some of the stuff that Marvel came out with, more graphic material was allowed. There was no comics code. It was a different thing entirely. 12 copies on the census. The next books on the list, and there are two of them that are tied with the top book from EC Comics. It is Mad, number 121, with this, how do they describe it as what they have going on here? Beatles cover. I guess this is a George Harrison kind of thing. Yeah, see the Beatles down below. That's kind of interesting. So Beatles, again, there's always something that's going to drive the top Mad book from the year. And there's also Mad Follies number 6. Both of these, this is a bigger book, probably twice the size of the Mad magazine. Both magazine sized, right? Yes, both with 10 copies on the census. Next book is from KK Publications, March of Comics, number 320, with Space Family Robinson Lost in Space. These are giveaways, I think, through shoe stores. We talked about this in the last issue. They're smaller than regular comics, maybe about 2/3 the height. And they reprinted all sorts of stuff from, Dell and Gold Key and maybe Harvey and some other publishers. They came out quite frequently. There's no price information because these were giveaways. And this particular book has a total of 3 copies on the census. Now we have 2 more publishers to talk about and really low census counts. Fawcett. They're just publishing Dennis the Menace. Dennis the Menace Giant, number 59. This one here, the Dennis the Menace Day by Day, with the flower power in the trade dress there. 2 copies on the Census. And the last one is like the last gasp of a publisher that we have featured for about 10 years, American Comics Group. Maybe more than that, going back to the early 50s, pre-code horror. Maybe 15 to 20 years. American Comics Group, which, you know, had Herbie and Forbidden Worlds and Adventures into the Unknown. They were no longer publishing comic books that were being distributed on newsstands and stuff. They were doing promotional comic books, and this one looks like a lot of fun. This is the Tupperware Dating Diary. Tales of Success of Tupperware Sales. What is that? I might just Tupperware Dating Diary. There's a 5.5 for $150. I have to specify that I want it to be in, let's see, collectibles, comics. There's only one. I'm not going to get it graded. There's a graded 5.5 available. That's the only copy on the Census. Tupperware Dating Diary. I don't know. Is it like, did the woman use diary Tupperware and then like that helped her get a date? Because I'm thinking like it's kind of promoted to housewives, right? And in 1968, they're not really promoting dating for how. I don't know what's going on this one. If you have any information about the Tupperware Dating Diary, let me know in the comments below, because that's one that's new to me. So there we go. The top books from 1968 on the CGC Census. That was a lot of fun to go through all those crazy books. You know, it was basically 3 sections: all the Marvel books, then all the DC books, and then everything else. So I hope you have fun watching these videos. I have fun. It is a lot of work. I have fun making them. So, what have we done? Like 35 of these? And I have another 57 to go, 58, because I'm going to have to do 2025. Oh, I'm just getting started on this. Good thing summer vacation's coming up soon. At any rate, I'd like to thank you so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Please watch a couple of my other videos if you want to. They're here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.